Welcome to the Feelings Files, where we explore real, raw, and powerful stories of resilience. I'm Michaela, a mental health therapist and a doctoral student studying resilience. This podcast dives into the journeys that test us and the resilience we build along the way. Through connection, we can plant seeds of healing. So grab a seat and let's dive in, one conversation at a time. We're in this together.
I just need to get the butterflies out. Just shake it out. Shake it out. Okay. And obviously, I feel like I'm a little hyper because I'm so nervous. And so I'm like, okay, we're talking about grief. We're talking about grief.
Well, reframe. We're talking about resilience as well.
Yes.
So
there you go. There you
resilience
go.
within grief.
Yes. And
Yes.
there's joy, and that can
Yeah.
also exist with grief.
Yes, things coexist.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, well, it's that way for trauma as well. You know, I think that's something I say all the time with my clients is allow the feelings to coexist, allow the joy and the sadness and all of the things to be there at the same time. That's okay. They don't necessarily have to be conflicting. They can just be sitting next to each other.
Yeah.
You know,
I love that.
I mean, working as a counselor, seeing grief and trauma, I think sometimes people perceive those as different things. But for me, those are very hand in hand. They overlap so much. I mean, you cannot go through trauma and not have grief. And I think it's fair to generalize grief a little bit as well. Going through grief, big grief, there has to be some element of trauma. You know, Lauren, you working with couples and families and individuals as an LMFT, I'm sure you see those things show up a lot just with one person, with both people. How has that shown up for you?
Absolutely. I think it's something that is so normal, and not just in loss of a loved one. I think that's a huge misconception that a lot of people have about grief, is that I have to go through this big loss in order to feel grief. And it can be, I think, in terms of loss of a job, loss of a relationship, big transitions that people go through.
Yeah.
They are mirroring some of those same symptoms of grief, which can even maybe imagining your life to be something and it doesn't turn out that way.
Oh, yeah.
That there's a huge grief in that as well. And so that shows up a lot in my clients. And so I love working alongside with that and with my clients to help them through that process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with any change, there is loss, and with any loss, there is grief. You know, when I have people come in and they're like, I had all these great things happen. I don't know why I'm feeling so numb. You know, I got the promotion. I moved to this new place. You know, I started this new life, but I am not happy. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about the grief. And they're like, oh, no, grief. And I'm like,
It's an odd word for them to hear.
I'm like, okay, let's step back a second. Let's talk about everything that has changed, everything you no longer have, even if you've been anticipating this and it's been exciting. You know, grief, I think, is something that is so universal.
100%.
Yeah.
I was just about to say that word.
Yeah.
It is absolutely universal. And, you know, when you are able to process and sit down with it and talk about it, it's refreshing because it's not just a numbness. It's a numbness that when you get to that place in your life, it's you have moved too fast through it, and maybe you're trying to cling to normalcy too fast. And I think the pause is good because it's, wait a minute, have I actually processed everything I need to?
Yeah.
What am I not processing, or what am I avoiding? Some people can try and move too quickly to normalcy, and so, or it's constantly on the go.
Yeah.
And that is where, like you said, you get to that place and they're like, wait, something is missing, or I'm not feeling as happy as I should.
Right.
So that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, we process grief. Now let's talk about, you know, a big grief, right? Your brain can't process all of that immediately. Like, all right, process done, good to go, move on. I think it comes in phases, you know, and I think everyone's different. I think, you know, the stages of grief or whatever, I think it's not this linear, clean process. It's just, what can you handle right now? And that's what your brain presents for you. It opens a little envelope, and then you deal with that, and then, you know, maybe another one later. but that's just very personal, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you see that with couples as well, maybe processing things differently at different speeds?
Absolutely. Everybody processes grief so differently. I mean, nobody actually knows how they're going to process that grief, especially if it's sudden, any sudden loss or sudden loss of a job, sudden loss of a loved one. Everybody grieves so differently, and there's these huge expectations on how to grieve right. And couples, especially, it's so hard. I mean, especially if it's whether you are getting into a new relationship after grief. That's kind of what happened in my situation. It was a very new relationship right after I had lost my brother. And it was this, I want to cling to normalcy so bad, and I want comfort, and I just want to feel normal again. And I think everybody, and for some, it can be isolation. It can be wanting to just isolate from everybody, everything. So if you're already in a relationship at that time, it can change the relationship at that point. Maybe for the other partner, they're like, I don't know how to deal with this. I have never experienced anything like this before. And it can feel like a huge disconnect. But that's why I think couples counseling can be so beneficial, even going through that process together. Like, how can I show up for my partner? What do they need? And it can be important for that other partner to maybe not that very moment be able to communicate right away, this is what I need, because they might not even know. But over time, it can be, I just might need comfort, or I just might need a hug, or intimacy can look different. I mean, it can be, I don't feel like being touched for the next 6 months, and that can be very hard if a person is, their love language is physical touch. And I see that a lot in couples. They're like, I don't know how to engage with them, but intimacy really is more than just, I mean, a physical thing. It can be having deep conversations. It can just be showing up for them. It can be cuddling. So all of those ways that, I think it's so important to just be patient for the other partner, to just be patient. And you don't have to necessarily understand fully the grief, but just be supportive and know that I think it can be scary for the other partner sometimes. They might look at it as they're never going to be the same. They're going into a depression, this major dark depression, when sometimes it's just a grief wave. And, I found many times I was, I would tell him, I'd be like, this is just a grief wave. I'm okay. I'm not going to fall into this giant hole, but also realizing too, how do we stay out of that pit? I think that's an important piece. I don't know if you want to share anything about how maybe avoiding staying in a place for too long after grief.
So I had a boyfriend at the time that I lost my dad. So we had already started dating. We were dating for, when you're a teenager, it was kind of a long time for being a teenager. Whoops.
I mean, it wouldn't be, authentic if we didn't have a little spill.
I know. It's me getting nervous. I'm talking about my high school boyfriend.
This is not an easy topic to talk about, when you've gone through grief as well. I think that's important to say. I mean, we're human beings. Yes, we're therapists, but we're also
human beings first.
Yes.
And then, for sure. But, he was there beforehand, met my dad, and then saw me when I found out I lost my dad. He actually was the one who told me that my dad had passed. And so, the core person for me was him at that time. And it became not only my identity, but also I think our identity as a couple. And I shut myself in my room for 6 months. And he was there through all that. He was great. He was a great support. I always really appreciate him for that, being that person in my life at that time. Didn't work out, obviously, but he was so helpful, and I'll always appreciate that. But he never tried to fix it. He never tried to find the words. There are no words. There's nothing you can say. He was just
absolutely.
there. And I think he just was silent most of the time, probably. I mean, that was a long time ago, but just let me talk and let me cry and just held the space. And that was really amazing. You know, for 6 months, it was a disaster. For 6 months, it was really bad. A lot of tears, a lot of guilt, a lot of sadness and despair. And I really took that on myself, and really, I blamed myself so much. So 6 months were pretty dark. And I had to make a decision. I'm either going to, it wasn't even really my decision. It was like words in my head, like, Michaela, you are either going to go down a dark path if you don't get up out of bed, or you're going to get up and you're going to put one foot in front of the other, and you're going to move forward. And so that's what I did, you know, and it was probably exactly 6 months, and then one foot in front of the other. My whole life was different, you know, and now I'm thankful that now, you know, my husband Zane, he's it feels like a fresh start for me, and that feels nice. You know, there's an element of like, you'll never know him or that piece of me, but for me, it also feels nice because it was so much of my identity before that now it feels like I'm, you know, moving forward in a different kind of way.
It's like a fresh start.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, so that's been different for me. And you know, we've been together a long time, but he does the same thing. He holds space. He doesn't try to fix it. He doesn't try to find words that don't exist.
Yeah.
He just listens and supports, and that's it. And that's all I need. You know, there's no solving it for your partner. Your partner has to just feel it and go through it, and you know, they have their own things they have to work through, but as a partner witnessing that, you just got to hold the space.
I love that. I think that's so powerful. And I love that you truly have turned your pain into purpose. I mean, you are, I know, as a friend, an amazing friend, a very empathetic friend, and also an amazing therapist. So I just want to point that out. I think I've learned a lot from you as well. Even, I mean, I didn't realize I'd ever go through my own really traumatic grief at this age in my life. I mean, it was in 2022, but knowing you before that, you know, there's always been these, I don't know if you've ever had any moments in your life where you look back and you're like, was that setting me up for this? Or were there people placed in my life that were meant to be there for that very moment? Or maybe just like, you know, that boyfriend had been there for that season of your life. It wasn't a permanency, but at least he was able to hold that space for you.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was something that sounds like that at that moment in time, it was a healthy place for a little bit.
Yes. And it was good. He was, you know, we were great friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now we have, and I love Zane for you, and that makes me happy.
Yeah.
That makes me happy. I definitely feel like that pit can be based on so many things for some people, and I think it's important to have a solid foundation for your life, no matter what it is, because we don't know what's going to happen in this life, and we don't know what we're going to go through. And I think it's important to already establish your values and your foundation, and it's more solid. It feels more solid.
Right.
So whatever happens, it's not going to fully break. It feels like there's been moments, I'm sure, well, for myself speaking,
Same.
you know, I'm like, okay, I feel like this, you know, I don't know if I'll come back from this, but also I think there's moments too where I didn't give myself, you know, enough credit, truly. But speaking on the pit, I think for me, what the weirdest thing was, I had these moments in my life that I just had this pulling on my heart. I think it was about a month or two before my brother had passed that I just had this calling that I just needed to go back to church for myself. I just, by myself, I needed to walk in, and I remember walking in and being like, okay, God, I'm here. And I had no idea what was about to happen, of course, but I think that for me was he was giving me strength that I didn't realize I needed. And, you know, for some people who, whatever their foundation is, whatever their, I think after the fact, it's okay. I remembered that that was a stable foundation for me. And I had seen a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms, a lot of unhealthy patterns, a lot of destructiveness and toxicity in my life. And I knew I didn't want that. I knew I didn't want to go down that road after loss. Everybody, of course, experiences it differently, but that's the one thing I can truly say is that my faith has kept me going. And I know that for some people, I had a client actually, and this is, I'm not, obviously I can't go into details. It's confidential, of course, but I will never forget this. I was seeing her and she lost her brother. This was before mine. And I just remember, you know, hearing the confidence that she still had, hearing the confidence in her plan in this life and her purpose. And even though she was going through so much pain, I was like, oh my goodness, just in my own, you know, head thinking about it, I was like, there's just so much strength in her. And there's this light that she still has, even in this darkness. I had no idea that mine would pass. I think it was even a month or two after I saw that client. And that for me was huge. It was like these little nuggets of I'm preparing you.
Right.
And so.
Wow. So you witnessed her have resilience and you were like, remarkable. Okay.
Yes.
How can someone still keep going, you know, after such a big hurt? Resilience. And then you experienced it and you're still here and I'm still here. We're all still here, you know? Yeah. I think one misconception I had before, you know, okay, I've had the worst thing that's ever going to happen to me and I did that, done. Nothing that bad will ever happen again. And I'm coming to find that that's not probably true. You know, I think I will, you know, and life has been hard, you know, just being an adult, I think is difficult, you know, but life has been hard in different ways. And I'm like, I'm not supposed to be struggling right now. I already did that. This is supposed to be easy now. I did my time struggling.
I did my time. Oh my gosh. I did my time. Yeah.
But no, I think that, you know, it's just part of the human experience. And I'm with you. I get emotional when I talk about God, but so I don't know. Just it brings the emotions. But I'm with you. You know, I think when I lost my dad, I think that was also a big, you know, again, not even a decision I was making. It was more kind of a question presented in my mind, like, which way are you going to go with this? And I couldn't like pray. I would just be like, all right, God, like, I don't have any words, but I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to think about you and send me something like a lifeline, help me out, you know, and it came in different ways over and over again. And so, I definitely, in those moments, leaned harder on God. And I think, you know, I've never been someone to have a huge support system. And I don't think we have to. You know, that's nice. It's great if you have that. But if you don't, having one person, you know, whether it's God, whether it's, you know, one friend, whether it's someone who they don't even know that they're your support system, right? You know, if it's, you know, there was this woman at the Starbucks that, you know, I would go to every single day before work. And I'm sure she was like that to everyone, but she, you know, would always greet me and ask me how my day was. And I was always so excited to see her every morning. She was just a light in my morning every day. And she, I'm sure, had no idea. But, you know, connection doesn't have to be this big, grand thing with these, you know, many people in your life. You know, you can find it in different ways. It's just about putting yourself out there and I think accepting it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so powerful. And even what you just said about that woman and the, you know, where you were, I don't think we realize the impact and the effect that we can have on people, which is so important, which is why kindness is so important, because you have no idea what somebody is going through. And so that is just so powerful. And I remember going to the grocery store after, you know, for the first time after loss, and you're in this grief fog, I call it. And
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people, everybody who experiences the death of a loved one, they have that fog. And I just remember being in the grocery store and just thinking how weird it was to be around these people who, you know, they're living their everyday lives, or they might have no idea what is going on in my life. And I didn't need them to, but I think kindness is just so, you have no idea what somebody is going through, and just even a smile or, you know, a simple interaction that could be positive is just so helpful. Like you said, I mean, especially because, you know, when you're going through grief, you might have a lot of support even in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then it can fade. And so it's kind of like that also too. It's, oh wow, everybody is here and everybody's showing up for you. And, you know, it's so nice. It's really nice. They're checking in on you. And then people's lives still go on after that. Life still spins. And so there might be a period where you're like, wait, where did it all go?
Yeah.
And so what stands out to me is just the really important connections, the ones that are so meaningful that after grief, I think it just switches something in your brain where you're a different person. You want purpose, or you know, life is short and it's so precious. And the interactions that you have with others, if they're not meaningful, or if they're not, if it's more of a shallow connection, for me personally, it was, I don't know if I want to continue those relationships or those things in my life that weren't purposeful. If I didn't know why I was doing it, I didn't want to do it anymore. It just didn't matter to me anymore. And I think there's more pressure on my own relationships, probably because I want to live more intentionally. And so I don't want to always live so deeply and so seriously, but I want to be with others who are just as intentional and, you know, have their why and know their purpose as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's what resilience is. You know, it's not like bouncing back like a rubber band. You know, I always really liked that analogy, but I think it's deeper than that. I think it's different than that. I think it's acting with intention. It's, you know, like you said, after all the people leave, after the lasagnas stop coming, after the phone calls stop,
all the food, which was so nice. You know, you're like, how can I eat this? But also, it's you have to eat. You have to eat. I mean, you have to keep your strength up.
Right. And those first, you know, few days, few weeks, maybe it's like people give you that space to just kind of exist in the fog. And then when the fog dissipates, you know, when the phone calls stop, who do you want to be? And that's you know, acting with intention to meet that is resilience. And that's, you know, just, again, being intentional, focusing on how do I move forward from here? You know, who do I want to be? Does this matter? Okay, then I'm not going to do it. You know, I think too, you know, what's changed for me is I have this thought of what's the point, and not in a cynical way, more in kind of like a don't take life too seriously way. You know, what's the point of all this? You know, we spend so much time stressing and, you know, having anxiety. I mean, I have anxiety all the time. I'm like a chihuahua, you know. But, you know.
Same.
Yeah. It's like.
Chihuahua energy.
Yes. But beyond that, if it's bigger than that, the anxiety is stronger than that. It's like, why am I doing this? You know, like planning for, I think it was Cyrus's birthday party. I think I was trying to find like the perfect something. I don't even remember what at this point because it didn't matter. And I was like searching. I had this idea and I'm like trying to figure it out. And I'm like, why am I doing this? What is the point? There's not a point. Let it go. No one cares.
Let it go.
No one cares. It doesn't matter. You know, focus on what matters. And that's not the little party decorations that no one is even going to pay attention to. You know, it's not it's not those things that I think we spend unnecessary stress worrying about. You know, it's connection, it's adventure, it's, you know, giving your soul a purpose.
Oh, I love that. I think it's so important to really just pause on that, and because for me it's been control and And, not a lot of people talk about how, when I said before, the clinging back to normalcy and wanting to do that so quickly,
Yeah.
you're trying to fill that void. You're trying to feel normal again.
Yeah.
And when there was that switch for me, it was, okay, I want to live with purpose. I want to live with intent. But wait a minute, there's this level of control now that I want to make sure that I can take care of I want to make sure that I don't lose anybody again.
Yeah.
And it definitely had reflected in my relationship, especially it was new. And, I'm like, okay, I have to make sure, even with my parents, what are they down to what are they eating? How are they taking care of themselves? If it's in our control, then maybe I can prevent, more loss, or I can prevent something from happening, and I think it's really important to know that that's common after loss, especially, but to know that we still sometimes may not always have control over certain people or certain things in our life, and anger is, for a lot of people, it can be avoidant, it can be anger, it can be anger maybe at God too. I mean, there's the opposite of that. There's I feel very blessed that I was able to feel his presence that day I went into church, and to feel and to have seen somebody else. I think, I knew somebody else that had lost somebody, and I saw them go down a very destructive path. And seeing that before I lost my brother, it was a lot of drinking, a lot of unhealthy coping. It was destroying relationships in their own lives. And I think seeing that, I knew I don't want to let this defeat me. I don't want to let this have control over myself. But family members in my own family, it was, they didn't have that. And it was, there was some pretty unhealthy coping there as well. So I'm over here like, I know I can pull you out of your own pit. I can help you through this. We can all grow through this together. And having, and grieving my own mindset of, if we all just go on my path.
Yeah. Come on.
If we can all trust in God's plan, if we can all, grow together in that, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay that we don't always have control. It might not feel okay, but I also know that, we can't destroy ourselves or hold ourselves back, or even get pulled down back into that pit trying to save others also.
Absolutely.
So that's important when you're dealing with grief and your own family. So.
Yeah, I think that my approach, it was kind of the same foundation, but a different kind of way of doing it. I was kind of like, okay, I want to prevent other people from losing someone the way I did. So I'm going into counseling, and I made it my whole identity, and that was not healthy. I almost switched to oceanography, and I wanted to, be out on a boat in the ocean and, test water samples and, swim with the dolphins. I don't know what they really do, but I mean, that's something I really considered. And it was like, no, I have a duty. I have a duty here, and I have to fulfill my duty. And I think that may have been helpful to keep me on a path for a little while. But at some point, it's like, okay, you have to have an identity outside of this.
Absolutely.
So that would be my advice, I think, for someone who is, experiencing grief that's long term. If you're still feeling that heavy grief, still feeling the guilt and all of the numbness and the sadness years later, and you feel like it's defining you, is to take a step, outside of that. Who do you want to be? And be who you are. That's from Toy Story.
Well, you need some lightness. You need, especially as a therapist and going through grief, you need lightness.
Yeah, forget who you're supposed to be and be who you are. That's from Bo Peep. One of Ellum's little Bo Peep toys says that.
Oh,
and it's like,
goodness.
That quote's in my head, and I'm like, right on. I love it.
I love that so much. I love that so much. I mean, that grief and joy can exist together. Joy and pain can exist together. And I was not able to give myself permission for a long time. And I think it's so important to know that I think there was a quote that I wanted to read real quick, because this quote I feel like saved me from a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Because there was so much guilt. Even laughing after, I
Yeah.
think even in a month in, and
How dare I?
and eating food,
Yeah.
or doing things that were supposed to be okay.
Right.
It didn't feel okay.
Yeah.
It was, how am I doing this and he's not here? How am I eating? He's not going to be able to ever enjoy a meal. And those things are, I think it's a little bit morbid, but I want to share this quote, because if anybody is struggling with that, experiencing joy, or feeling guilty for laughing, feeling guilty for finding happiness, I hope that this can help. And this was sent to me by somebody on Instagram, and he was so sweet for sending it to me. Let's see. Hold on one second. Let me pull it up. Okay. I said, someone described grief to me today perfectly. Grief can feel like a painful hole in your heart. It can really feel like a physical pain. But although painful, after a while, you realize the goal isn't to fill the hole. Instead, the hole will remind you of how deeply you love that person, and you'll be okay to let the hole exist. Remember that it's possible to be both deeply sad and genuinely happy. And I just find that that to me just opened my eyes, and I just was like, okay, I can just let this hole exist. I don't have to fill it. I don't have to immediately replace it, because I mean that he will always mean so much to me, and it's okay that it's there. We're never going to truly be the same after loss, and that's okay. I think we've both been very humbled by it. We've been able to use it for purpose, and it's like, okay, you are going to try and help others with this, or you're going to be able to find empathy and show empathy towards others who are going through loss. Because at first I was like, I'm retiring as a therapist now, but it's important to get therapy. It's important to get counseling, and because we also have to be at a good place as well. I think that was something very prevalent to me, was I can't just rush back into therapy after this. Seeing clients, I have to make sure that I'm doing my own work. And we had talked about this. I was like, I don't want clients right now who are going through heavy grief or heavy trauma. And so I had to give myself a little break from that for a while, or anything that was directly related to, car accidents and things like that. And so you have to know your boundaries as well. It's not this, resilience doesn't mean I have to do this, I have to get back in there, and I have to take on all of this stuff. It's okay. Resilience means you know your boundaries, and you are aware of what you can handle, and what is okay to just say, I can take a break from that right now. I can give myself that grace right now to heal. And so I think that was an important piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me and for sharing. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. And hopefully these conversations can, help others and bring light to others who are going through their own grief, whatever that may be, whatever grief you are going through. And so thank you for having me on.
Yes.